Donald Trump has signed executive orders imposing aggressive new tariffs of up to 25% on Canada, Mexico and China.
The U.S. is locked in a full-blown tariff war, and now President Donald Trump is facing another growing crisis, the rising cost of everyday medicine. Pfizer, one of America's biggest pharmaceutical giants, has revealed a chilling truth. A large part of its drug production relies on raw materials from China.
And one of the largest exporters of pharmaceuticals to the U.S. that would be hit by the tariffs? China.
China controls nearly 90% of the world's supply of pharmaceutical ingredients. That means the U.S. medical system is now deeply entangled in a global supply chain, one that is suddenly under pressure. With Pfizer caught in the middle and hospital shelves at risk of running dry, the pressure is mounting, and all eyes are turning to Trump.
In the longer term, what we're seeing is companies looking at where exactly they're getting all their active ingredients from, the chemicals that go into their drugs, where they're sourcing the medical devices that might help produce their drugs.
So, is this tariff war a bold step to protect national security? Is Trump protecting the country? Or accidentally pushing it toward a medical crisis? Pfizer isn't just a pharmaceutical company, it's one of the key arteries in America's healthcare system. From hospitals to urgent care clinics, countless facilities rely on Pfizer's medications to treat life-threatening conditions every single day. Among its top-selling drugs is Eliquis, a widely prescribed anticoagulant used to prevent strokes and blood clots in patients with atrial fibrillation. In 2024, Eliquis generated over $13 billion in global revenue, with millions of prescriptions filled in the U.S. alone. It's a drug that cardiac patients quite literally depend on to stay alive. Then there's Paxlovid, Pfizer's oral antiviral for COVID-19. This wasn't just a pandemic-era quick fix. As of late 2024, it's still prescribed routinely to high-risk patients, especially the elderly and immunocompromised. The drug brought in $2.7 billion in Q3 of 2024 alone, underlining its ongoing relevance.
Yeah, Alan, Glenda, very busy out here. This is the Pfizer facility in Portage. This is where they are mass producing millions of doses of that life-saving COVID-19 vaccine.
Pfizer's reach isn't limited to pharmacies. It operates 11 major manufacturing facilities and 2 national distribution centers across the U.S. The Kalamazoo, Michigan site, Pfizer's largest, handles critical ingredients and sterile injectables, while the Rocky Mount, North Carolina facility alone produces nearly 25% of the sterile injectables used in U.S. hospitals.
I'm thrilled to be here with Pfizer as they announce a $750 million investment in Michigan, 300 good-paying jobs.
And accessibility matters. Through its Rx Pathways program, Pfizer provided over 2.8 million prescriptions at low or no cost to Americans in need. That's not charity, that's infrastructure. In total, Pfizer's medicines touched the lives of over 600 million patients globally in just 1 year. It's not just a supplier, it's a lifeline. But here's the twist. Pfizer, the very system powering America's healthcare, has a chokehold around its neck. And that chokehold belongs to another country. Yes, you heard that right. Pfizer, just like every major pharmaceutical company, relies heavily on a supply chain that stretches far beyond U.S. borders. At the heart of this chain are active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs, the essential building blocks of medications. While Pfizer manufactures many of its drugs domestically, a significant portion of these critical components is sourced from abroad. And a significant portion of these life-saving ingredients are made in China. In fact, if we look at reports, we find that China dominates approximately 80% of the global generic API supply chain, with around 13% of the APIs directly exported to the United States. This heavy reliance on a single source for essential drug components exposes a critical vulnerability in the pharmaceutical industry's supply chain. And now, because of President Donald Trump's one bold trade move, the entire medical system has started to wobble. In April 2025, President Donald Trump, invoking the rarely used International Emergency Economic Powers Act, placed a sweeping 10% tariff on all imported goods. Yes, all, including life-saving drugs and the ingredients needed to make them. The justification? National security. The administration pointed to rising concerns over fentanyl trafficking and illegal drug imports, vowing to take control of what crosses U.S. borders. But what started as a crackdown quickly turned into a crisis for the very system it aimed to protect.
Pharmaceuticals, we don't make our own drugs anymore. The drug companies are in Ireland and they're in lots of other places, China. And all I have to do is impose a tariff. The more, the faster they move in.
At first glance, it made sense. Why should the U.S. depend on foreign nations for life-saving medicine? Let's make it all here, boost local manufacturing, and keep dangerous substances out. The idea was clean and clear, but when it met the messy reality of America's global pharma supply chain, the cracks started to show fast. If we look at reports, the U.S. imported over $210 billion worth of medicinal products in 2024 alone. That's not just pills and syringes, it's insulin, cancer drugs, antibiotics, the essentials. And a huge chunk of those ingredients comes from the very countries hit by tariffs. According to Tariff News, the impact hit the supply chain where it hurt the most. China, the world's leading supplier of active pharmaceutical ingredients, suddenly became an expensive and unstable source. These aren't just exotic chemicals, these are the essential building blocks for antibiotics, cancer treatments, blood pressure meds, and more. Without them, shelves start to empty and factories can't fill prescriptions. And what most people didn't see coming is that since almost 80% of the ingredients used to make medications in the U.S. come from China, every one of those critical components was now slapped with a 10% tax at the border. Suddenly, what was meant to be a shield became a roadblock. These tariffs have sent ripples through the pharmaceutical sector, highlighting its fragility. The industry is not just global, it's deeply interconnected. APIs manufactured in China are often shipped to India for formulation, then to Europe for packaging, and finally to the U.S. for distribution. Disruptions at any point in this chain can lead to significant delays and shortages. Pfizer, for instance, has reported an anticipated $150 million in additional costs this year due to the tariffs. CEO Albert Bourla made it clear that this unpredictable landscape was forcing Pfizer to rethink its investments in U.S. manufacturing and research. While the company already operates 13 manufacturing sites across the country, Bourla said they were holding back on expanding due to the looming threat of tariffs. The company had no choice but to adopt a cautious approach, knowing that a sudden tariff policy shift could disrupt their ability to plan long-term. And it's not just Pfizer that's feeling the sting of these tariffs. Johnson & Johnson, a healthcare titan known for its wide range of medical devices and pharmaceuticals, is bracing for a significant hit. The company estimates a potential $400 million impact in 2025, primarily due to China's 125% retaliatory tariff on U.S. goods. CEO Joaquin Duato emphasized that while the company is investing $55 billion over the next 4 years to bolster U.S. manufacturing, tariffs are not the ideal solution. He stated, tariffs can create disruptions in the supply chain, leading to shortages, advocating instead for tax policies to encourage domestic production. Another important company called Bristol Myers Squibb, renowned for its cancer and immune disease treatments, is also on high alert. CEO Chris Boerner warned that poorly implemented tariffs could disrupt pharmaceutical supply chains, adversely affecting both companies and patients. He highlighted the complexity of drug manufacturing and the reliance on global raw material sources, cautioning that tariffs could lead to supply constraints. Eli Lilly, a leader in diabetes and cancer medications, announced plans to invest $27 billion in U.S. manufacturing to mitigate tariff impacts. However, the company acknowledges that building new facilities takes time and the immediate effects of tariffs are concerning. Generic drug manufacturers, responsible for 90% of U.S. prescriptions, face significant challenges due to tariffs on imported active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, from China and India. With razor-thin margins, many cannot absorb rising production costs. Some may scale back or exit the market, risking drug shortages and reduced access to affordable medications for American patients. Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, a key player in the generic drug market, is concerned about the impact of tariffs on its operations. With much of its supply chain dependent on imports, the company faces higher costs that could affect its ability to offer affordable medications. Similarly, Sandoz warns that tariffs may disrupt the supply of essential medicines, especially those already in short supply. And just when U.S. drug makers began to feel the squeeze, China struck back. In fact, officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs slammed the move as a reckless disruption to global trade. They called it a violation of international norms and warned that it would severely disrupt the global economic order. Their response wasn't just diplomatic, it was economic warfare. According to Tariff News, Beijing retaliated fast, slapping up to 125% duties on a wide range of U.S. imports, including critical pharmaceutical products. The message was clear. If Washington was going to play hardball, China would match it without hesitation. This move raised the cost of exporting American-made drugs to China, a market that accounts for a substantial portion of global pharmaceutical sales. The Chinese government also introduced non-tariff barriers, such as stringent regulatory approvals and increased inspections, further complicating the export process for U.S. pharmaceutical companies. Pfizer, with its significant operations in China, found itself directly affected. In 2024, Pfizer earned over $4.6 billion from its Chinese operations. The retaliatory tariffs and regulatory hurdles have made it more challenging for Pfizer to compete in the Chinese market, squeezing profit margins and increasing operational complexities. To mitigate these challenges, Pfizer is taking strategic steps. The company is considering shifting part of its API sourcing away from China, exploring increased procurement from European suppliers, and expanding production capacity at its Kalamazoo, Michigan site. But let's take a step back. Is this really all chaos, or is there a method to Donald Trump's madness? After all, his goal wasn't just economic warfare, it was to stop the flood of illegal drugs from pouring across American borders. So the question is, did these tariffs spark a crisis, or were they a necessary shock to a system already too dependent on foreign hands? For years, America's pharmaceutical supply chain has been riddled with leaks that counterfeiters, smugglers, and desperate patients have exploited. A perfect example, Ozempic. Originally designed for type 2 diabetes, it became a runaway hit for weight loss. But when demand exploded and prices soared, something else flooded in: counterfeits. In April 2025, the FDA seized several hundred units of counterfeit Ozempic infiltrating the legitimate supply chain, prompting warnings to healthcare providers and patients alike. These counterfeit products were distributed outside the Novo Nordisk authorized supply chain in the U.S., raising serious concerns about the integrity of pharmaceutical distribution networks. The dangers of these counterfeit drugs are profound. Some contain incorrect dosages, harmful substances, or entirely different medications. A notable case involved a U.S. citizen who purchased what appeared to be Ozempic in Mexico, only to discover it was mislabeled insulin, a substitution that could have had fatal consequences. The proliferation of counterfeit Ozempic is part of a larger trend. The World Health Organization estimates that counterfeit pharmaceuticals are a multi-billion-dollar industry, with fake versions of essential medications posing significant health risks worldwide. Beyond Ozempic, other essential drugs, such as fentanyl, have entered the U.S. illegally. Fentanyl, a potent opioid used for pain management, has been smuggled in large quantities, contributing to the national overdose crisis. China is a primary source, with the drug often passing through Mexico before reaching U.S. streets. The FDA prohibits personal drug importation due to safety risks, but enforcement is challenging, especially when medications are unavailable or unaffordable domestically. This has allowed a shadow market to thrive, highlighting the fragile pharmaceutical supply chain and the need to address affordability, accessibility, and global manufacturing interdependence. So, while President Donald Trump's tariffs, designed to strengthen domestic manufacturing and curb the influx of illegal drugs, have had significant consequences for the healthcare sector. While the tariffs aim to reduce reliance on foreign imports, they have led to higher costs for medical supplies, equipment, and treatments. The healthcare industry, which depends heavily on imported medical devices and components, has been notably impacted. For example, China is a major supplier of active pharmaceutical ingredients, and the tariffs have driven up production costs for pharmaceutical companies. This could result in higher prices for consumers. Medical device manufacturers have also felt the effects. Companies producing critical equipment like CT scanners, surgical robots, and insulin pumps often rely on components from countries now subject to tariffs. These added costs are likely to be passed on to hospitals and patients, increasing healthcare expenses. Moreover, tariffs have disrupted global supply chains, leading to delays in the delivery of essential medical equipment. A survey by Black Book Research found that tariffs could raise the cost of care by at least 15%. Hospitals are now considering shifting these increased costs to insurers and patients, further escalating out-of-pocket expenses. This complex situation highlights the challenges global trade poses to critical sectors like healthcare. As the situation evolves, it remains to be seen how the healthcare industry will adapt to these challenges and whether the intended benefits of the tariffs will materialize without compromising patient care and access to essential medical services. But what if, in the middle of this trade war and tariff turmoil, a new pandemic suddenly broke out? The world has already witnessed the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the disruptions it caused in global supply chains, especially in the pharmaceutical sector. From shortages of critical personal protective equipment, PPE, to the sudden spike in the prices of everyday medications, the ripple effects were felt across the globe. Take, for instance, the U.S. experience during the COVID-19 pandemic. With lockdowns and export restrictions led to production halts in countries like China, leaving healthcare systems struggling to meet the rising demands. Combined with production bottlenecks, this skyrocketed drug demand and caused price hikes. In the U.S., prescription drug prices increased by 2.5%, with some medications costing up to 3 times more than before. Now let's consider what might happen if a new pandemic were to emerge right in the middle of this already tense global environment. Trade disputes and pharmaceutical tariffs would worsen the situation. For instance, the U.S. 25% tariff on pharmaceutical imports could raise drug costs by $51 billion annually, causing prices to spike by 12.9%. This could make essential medications inaccessible, especially in already fragile healthcare systems. But that's not all. These tariffs could also lead to severe shortages of critical medications, particularly generics. Rising production costs may force manufacturers with slim margins to exit the market, worsening supply chain issues. Without exemptions for essential drugs, the crisis would deepen, leaving many countries unprepared for a health emergency. A pandemic doesn't just affect one country, it impacts the whole world. And with ongoing trade tensions and tariff disputes, international collaboration could be severely hindered. Instead of working together for a global solution, countries might prioritize national issues, slowing down the response. A new pandemic amidst this turmoil could worsen the situation far beyond the COVID-19 crisis. Strained supply chains, rising drug prices, and shortages of essential medications would cripple global healthcare systems, highlighting the need for stronger international cooperation and resilient healthcare systems capable of withstanding such crises. So what do you think? Are these tariffs a necessary reset or a dangerous gamble? Can America truly afford to cut off its global supply chains? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more sharp insights. Thanks for watching.